Hello and welcome to a Passenger Seat podcast, a podcast designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, all recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor Peggy. I'm Becca, and today we are going to be talking all about Peggy and addressing her recent restoration, answering all of the questions that I've had during and after from you guys about the process, going into all of the details, all of the costs, because I think it's a really useful thing to have out there as a resource. Obviously, the cost is only the cost for Peggy's exact situation and at the exact time when the work was done, because these sorts of prices are fluctuating all of the time. But it gives you kind of a starting point if this is something that you are looking into, and I think will help a lot of people understand whether restoration is for them through professional means. Without further ado, let's get into all of those sorts of details. So one of the first questions I got is, how has it worked? How long's the waiting list? How long did it take? And how many people were working on your car? So I first came across Ian Allen of Minor Services in September 2022. Peggy needed some welding near the leaf spring hanger on the driver's side, and I'd taken it to somewhere else. They'd backed out of the work, and my dad had said, I remember seeing this place up near Ely in Witchford. Do you know anything about there? What about taking it there and seeing if he'll do the work? And so we got in contact with him, took Peggy round, got a quote for the work that was going to be done, but also out of interest we said to him, okay, how much would a bare metal respray with the welding that she needs doing kind of now look like? So we went through all of that. He had a good look round Peggy, and he gave me an estimate of about 9k plus VAT. And so I kind of knew what I was working towards, and I said, okay, when is the first time that I would be able to get booked in with yourself? And he said it's really going to be 2024. The way that he works, from what I can tell, from what he said, is that he will have one car that is a long-term project in at a time, and he will work on that pretty much exclusively throughout the period that it is there, and he takes in smaller jobs to do alongside it. So he had big long-term projects kind of booked in up until early 2024, and then any little jobs like small bits of welding, MOT work and things like that, he does around waiting for paint to dry, waiting for parts to turn up, anything like that. So waiting for things to come back from the shop blasters, whatever it might be. So that's kind of how it worked. So I was like, okay, yes, put me in the back of your diary for 2023 to give me a call and let me know kind of what the sort of the timing is. During 2023, I went to him for a few other little bits and bobs. He got her ready for an MOT and put her through an MOT before I took her to the Netherlands. A few other little bits and bobs with like tracking, replacing of a trunnion, and kind of just getting her little bits and bobs, keeping myself kind of in with him, I guess, and also just kind of reminding him that I existed and that I was still interested in that work being done in 2024. Early 2024, we have a call to see what the dates we were looking at based on the projects that he currently had in, what he was expecting to do before Peggy went in. And at that time, he said, we're looking at around mid-March. So I knew that that was when I was working towards, and I said, okay, and how long do we think the work is going to take? So that, again, I had an idea to prep for how long we were going to be without Peggy, because obviously she's my daily driver, and it was a case of we needed to buy another car, or could we kind of work around other options? So he said at the time, I'd like it to take 2 months, but probably allow for 3. So I knew that when she went in, that was how long we were going to be without the car. which I think might surprise a lot of you. I've heard lots of people who send their cars in for the same amount of work, perhaps even less than what Peggy went in for, and it be much longer than that. And that can be down to the fact that the cars will sit there alongside lots of other long-term projects. It can be that they've got lots of other work coming in at the same time, and all of that will impact it. But the way that Ian Allen works is that a car that's coming in for the sort of work that Peggy's coming in for, he wants it in and out as quickly as possible to get on to the next one. And he himself has lots of cars that come to him after they've kind of been rescued from various places, and he then finishes off the restoration because it's been sat in someone's yard for months and months and months, and there's been no progress. So this isn't an advertisement for him in particular, but it is kind of because he's not looking for any more work, I would say. But it is something that I think, if you're looking for someone to trust your beloved classic with, something to think about going forward. When I rang at the beginning of March to check in on how we were doing, there'd been various things with the current project that he had in, but also the other guy that he works with, that meant that it was going to be pushed into April start. And that was fine. I just needed to know. So once I knew that, we were all sorted. On April 8th, as you might have seen if you've been following along on the YouTube vlogs of it all, Peggy got dropped off. Part of that drop off included going through everything that we wanted done, noticing anything that had changed since the last time that he'd seen her, listing out any special requests. So for me, that was getting red carpets that were kind of non-standard for the type of car I had. The wheels being painted as they had been before, but obviously professionally, getting shot blasted. It was getting new tyres, because I thought if she's going to have a fresh look, she needs to have kind of fresh wheels and stuff that match into that. All of these like little non-standard things all logged down on the kind of job sheet. And from that, he kind of thinks about a recent job that he's done that has kind of a similar level of work to what he thinks is going to have to be done. And he gives an estimate. And the estimate at this point was about £11,000 plus VAT. And he gave me a job sheet for a different car that had been in reasonably recently. I think that was the end of 2023. So a car that had had a similar level of work, to give me an idea of just how many hours had gone into that and how much that had cost. And that particular one, plus VAT, I think came to around 16,588. But that car was in kind of need of more welding and more parts than Peggy was. So that was the closest he had to give me an idea of what it might look like, but a really useful tool to have, because you know that when you go into these sorts of projects, there's going to be elements of project creep. You know that the amount that's given to you on that first day is a tentative amount, because realistically you don't know how bad a car is until you get right down to the metal. You can make very educated guesses, and that's exactly what Ian did, but you can't know everything until you get down. And with Peggy it was exactly the same. So seeing a car that had come in looking relatively similar to Peggy, had a few things crop up, and seeing that kind of list of things be presented to me was incredibly useful. So dropped her off, agreed that I was happy to go ahead with everything and that was happening, left her there, and I did my first visit to her on April 14th, and she's kind of completely stripped off. All of the wings are off, all of the windows and stuff are out, the interior's out, and the engine's out, and kind of work is about to begin. There's elements of welding that have already started at this point, but it is really just the beginning of the work that goes into her. I then go and visit again on April 25th, The welding is completed along the driver's side pretty much at that point, and work has started on the passenger side. The engine bay welding that needed doing, which was the front crossmember and the chassis leg on the passenger side, had also been done. He also then has a 1-week holiday booked in for the beginning of May. It wasn't something he particularly wanted to land in my restoration or in anyone's restoration, but it's one of those things. So he has a 1-week holiday, and my next visit is the 18th of May. And this is where we see her almost all of the welding done. I think he was working on the boot lid at the time and finishing that off, and she was stripped down to bare metal. It's worth noting that the engine bay, aside from the bit of welding that was being done, wasn't being touched. As I explained in my final kind of coverage of the vlogging aspect of it, I'd left the engine bay as is because I think it's her original paint in the engine bay, and also I wasn't that worried about having a shiny, lovely engine bay. I wanted a working engine bay that I was happy to work on. So that's 18th of May, and I think that the weirdest thing is going to be seeing her in the bare metal, and it was seeing her like that was pretty surprising. But what is actually weirder is when I pop along on the 5th of June and I see her fully primered and painting about to start the following day, because there is no sign of what I remember Peggy looking like. There's no Trafalgar blue. She's on a different set of wheels that he has exclusively for painting in case of overspray, has a different steering wheel in her, so looks completely nothing like Peggy, and that was pretty surprising. And at that point I say, okay, we're obviously kind of at the halfway stage now, because it's now a case of building back up. How long do we realistically think this is going to take? And his estimate at this point is 3 weeks, which is obviously a little bit close to when I'd hoped to pick her up. I hadn't planned to see her again after I'd seen her in the primer. However, on the 13th of June, I have to drop off the red piping for the rear arches, another one of those special requests that I'd wanted that made her non-standard but does make her Peggy. And when I saw her then, the engine was in and running, the windows were in most places. I don't think the rear window was done at that point because I was getting a heated rear windscreen put in. And the engine, somewhat satisfyingly, had taken 3 men and 3 jacks and a lot of in and out to get in. I think they'd taken it in and out 3 times. Because of the non-standard gearbox, it just didn't want to mate up properly, but they got there in the end. But it does mean that us struggling with it last year was a little bit validating. On Monday the 24th of June, I ring up to see kind of how things are going, what's it looking like, and the calls that I have on the Monday are hopeful but not definite. It was a kind of a no until I said that, oh, well, I was kind of hoping to take her to National this weekend. And then he was like, okay, we'll see what we can do. And I think that's the bonus of having a restorer that is an enthusiast first. They understand that you want to be able to take your car to shows that you had booked in, and they are not only going to treat the car like they would like their car to be treated, but also are going to understand and probably go out of their way to do little bits and pieces. 27th of June, which is the Thursday, I have a call at lunchtime that is hopeful and almost certain, just the last few little bits and bobs to go in, and an evening, a promise of an evening call after a test drive. As you might have heard, evening call comes at 9:30 in the evening after much stress and issues with the ignition. But she starts, she goes, she does her test drive, and I am cleared to come and pick her up on the Friday to take her to National Weekend. I receive the bill on the 9th of July because he'd spent so much time doing all of the bits and pieces that needed to be done to get her finished for national, but there was no bill. But again, it's a case of we'd got to know each other over the time, and he trusted me to come back and pay the bill, pay what was owed, and not disappear off the face of the earth. But also he knew that I had a huge digital presence, so finding me and tracking me down if I didn't pay would not be too difficult. So I get the bill. Now I guess it's time to go into the bill. So I've got 5 pieces of A4 here, and this is the real reason that I'm sat stationary recording today's podcast, because I really wanted to give you guys as much detail as I could and get that detail as accurate as possible, so that you guys could use this podcast as a reference for anything that you're going into. So in total, the labour hours is 245 hours, charged at £40 an hour. That doesn't include VAT. VAT is added on later, and that came to a total of 9,800. So that includes stripping off the lights, the wings, the bumpers, the grille, removing glass, entire interior, engine bay, petrol tank, fuel lines, brake tubes, pulling the loom forward, jacking it up over a pit, removing the front suspension, gearbox covers, taking grille to pieces, bumper irons and the grille parts to the sandblasters, cut out and replacing the near side chassis leg and the front cross member, fitting a near side tie plate and making repairs to a flinch panel, cut out and replacing centre cross member and begin to remove offside sill, remove offside sill, rear floor, and prepare the new panels, replace rear floor, entire sill structure, made repairs to A-post and box pillar, fitted a jacking point, lower body side, rear inner sill, repaired filch, complete offside filch, cut off bottom of the door, fitted lower frame and door skin, checked door gaps, cut out rear arch flange, cut out rear inner wings, fitted repair, fitted flange, fitted trial fitted wing, cut off near side body, cleaned up lower roof stem, rust treated, cut away, fitted near side rear floor spring hammer and fitted body side, fitted near side rear arch repair, cut out and fitted rear inner arch and boot floor, repaired boot apron, fitted upper bump stops, cut out and replaced front floor, fitted near side jacking point, underfloor seat brackets, fitted drain holes, cleaned up all welds, applied PU sealant to all panel joints, removed near side floor for repair, fitted new lower skin and door frame, removed boot lid, cut off lower skin and removed frame and cut off upper skin, cleaned up, rust treated, fitted boot lid skin and frame, made upper skin repair, trial fitted, completed door, removed panel paint from the rear sides, boots around, fitted trial and modified rear wing to suit, applied fibre fill to get good tolerances, paint removed from boot lid doors, applying filler collected from blasting, welding repairs to front panel, trial fitted doors, wings, applying filler, paint stripping boot bonnet, paint stripping off paint and rust on bonnet, applied rust killer, filling topside to shell and panels, final prep to all panels including glass valances, filling the bonnet, degreased, etch primered, primed loose panels, prepared shell to 24 grit inside and out, dusted, masked shell, etched and primed loose panels, flatted, topped all panels, etched all primed and primed shell, primed all panels, flatted shell, applied PU sealer to gutters and stopper to blemishes, flatted all panels to 500 grit, flatted shell to 320 grit, took wheels for blasting, top coated all loose panels, primed shell, flatted shell to 500 grit, top coated inside and out, masked boot and bonnet lid for underseal, masked shell, applied 6 litres, body shorts to inner floor and underbody, painted wheels and grille, old English white, painted engine bay, that's the bonnet side of things, and the bits that were welded, fitted grille surround, petrol tank, pipe, built up front grille, both bumpers, wiper, drives, wheels, fitted brake cables, offside front brake cylinders, brake shoes, hoses, fitted screen sides, glasses, washer jets, made up and fitted headlining, fitted door shelves, repaired offside top door frame, built up both windows with new rubbers, fitted front wings with new bases, headlamp buckets, flatted and compounded, rear quarters, wing cut piping, fitted gearbox cover, masked and painted wheels red on rims, painted kick plates silver, fitted rear wings, masked and applied shorts under wings, fitted boot lids and glove boxes, laid wires for rear heated windscreen, fitted the switch, fitted the lower door strips, rear side interior panels having applied cavity wax and door panels with polyurethane liners, fitted rear screen, scuttle panels, carpets, fitted bumpers, kick plates, sill finishes, boot floor, compounded, polished, badges, bonnet flashes, painted coach line, fitted tyres, fought to find ignition fault and took on a test run. So yeah, 245 hours in that, and I hope that list wasn't too much information for you, but you can just hear just how much stuff went into taking her apart, rebuilding her all up, and everything from there onwards. So huge amount of work that went into that. And that didn't include the fact that whenever I went for a visit, I was often there for an hour, talking to him, learning about the car, finding out what he'd found out since my last visit about the car. So things like the bump to the rear quarter, the fact that this door is not an original door because at some point it's been almond green. All of these sorts of things and these big talks and learning so much about Morris Minors was kind of an extra added bonus to it all that I got from going to someone who was so experienced with the cars and with restoring them. So yeah, 245 hours, and looking at the huge amount of hours that went in that last week alone to get her ready is quite a feat. Obviously, in order to do all of that work, there is the kind of parts costs and everything else attached to it. And parts came to around £3,300 approximately. And so that, whilst a huge number, is possibly something that people could bring down by purchasing panels and things like that separately. But I had bought some wings from essentially the sort of thing that you'd find at like an auto jumble. 2 wings that had been on a car that had been taken off that were in okay condition. But the fact is that when I showed him them, it was a case of the amount of work that would go into making those wings look as good as a pair of heritage wings would cost more than buying a set of heritage wings. So if you're doing the work yourself and you're not looking for a concourse car, you can get cheaper panels and find panels over a longer period of time from auto jumbles and things like that. You can find workarounds that would cut some of your parts cost, but the reality is that with a restoration, the money is in the labour hours. And again, there's stuff that could have been done that perhaps would have reduced that. So I could have stripped out as much of the car as possible. I could have maybe removed the engine, but that then made it more tricky for me to get the car to him. I would have either had to pay for him to come and pick the car up, or had to have kind of left the car in a really bare state to then take it there. But also, by including that within the kind of stuff that he was doing, it meant that I wasn't without a car for longer, because it would have taken me longer than, I think it took him 4 whole days to do all of that stripping, and that would have taken me weeks and weeks and weeks to do around work and stuff like that. So it's a tricky balancing act. So overall, with VAT and stuff like that, Peggy's restoration came to around £15,000. And there's still little bits that I want to do, like the front seats, getting those recovered and reupholstered to make it kind of fit with the rest of the car. And this is not what anyone would call a concourse car. If you were looking for a concourse car, then there would have been so much more replaced than I did. I kept all of the chrome work. I kept all of the door cards where possible. I kept the rear seats. I'm only changing the front seats because they're so worn and used. So there's lots of stuff that you could easily end up falling into this huge great pit if you wanted an absolutely perfect car. Peggy is amazing and so much better than she was when I got her, than I think she'd been in a long time. But that isn't to say that she would be the best car necessarily in a national weekend. I mean, it's proven by the fact that we went to a national weekend the day after I'd picked her up, and she came fourth in fourth in condition class. So that's the costs and things. To answer explicitly some of these questions, she cost £50,000, and it was essentially, for the most part, one man doing the work. He does have another 2 people that come and do bits and pieces, but in terms of bodywork and welding and all of that, that is almost exclusively done by Ian himself. What this has brought up for me, though, is I think an interest in what this means for the classic car scene. Increasingly, the affordability of a daily driver sort of vehicle is becoming more and more. I know people that would have bought a car not dissimilar to Peggy for maybe £1,000, £1,500 when I first got her 10 years ago, and I ended up paying £4,000 odd for her, because the price of even a usable daily classic has gone up. And then add into the fact that that car, being under the stresses of being daily used, is going to have stuff like rot crop up. It's going to be a case of you have to get very good at a lot of skills, or at least decent at a lot of skills, to keep these cars going, or have pockets that can afford that. Is what we did to Peggy financially sensible? Financially something that you could explain? Probably not. I could have got another 2-3 Peggies for the price that we paid for her restoration. But the thing that always sat in the back of my mind was, if I bought another one for the same amount of money as I'd paid for Peggy, what's to say I wouldn't have been in the same situation 3 or 4 years down the line as I was with Peggy? Unless you are buying a car, which some people are going to be fortunate enough to do, that has an extensive history with huge amounts of photos of a very in-depth restoration, you don't really know what you're getting. Because when we got Peggy, she looked fantastic, and all of the things that cropped up over the years, there was no kind of hint that that was going to happen in those 4 years. Whereas I have seen cars that have gone through the same sort of process with Ian Allen and are in a better situation 5-6 years later than Peggy was after 4 years of my ownership. They're in a better situation 10 years after. So it's a case of putting the money in to know that what you've got is a solid car. because there's no guarantee that you pay £12,000 for a car from anyone and you get a car that is going to be worth £12,000 once issues start cropping up. But also, obviously, these cars aren't about making money. I hate all of the TV shows that make out that you can make money off of classic car ownership. It's a hobby, and like every hobby, it's kind of a money pit, and we make these decisions that may not be financially the smartest thing to do because you have an emotional attachment to them, because you are invested in keeping these cars on the road, and that's exactly what's influenced us to do this. The other way to think about it, it sounds like I'm just sat here justifying how much money I've spent on my car, but the other thing to think about it is, and this is how I've been thinking about it for the last year or so, knowing that it could cost this much, is I could walk into any dealership around the country to buy a brand new car, and it would cost me 2 times, nearly 3 times in some cases, as much to buy their most basic car, and that would be years and years and years of monthly payments and stuff like that. And at the end of it, you would have a car that was worth a whole lot less than what you'd invested in it, which is exactly the situation I'm in with Peggy. She's worth less than I've invested in her. But it's not a car that would necessarily give me the smiles, give me the experiences, give me the friendships that Peggy has. So she's cost me less than that, and my hope is that by investing in her, I've got many, many years more of happy motoring with her to come. So it's a long podcast and a long one of me sat here talking, and if you've got any more questions about it, please let me know. Drop them down in the YouTube comments, drop me a message on social media. I'm not gatekeeping any of the information around this because it's information that I think is really useful to other people who want to get the cars out there. I've not gatekeeped where I got the work done. People have been asking me about the waiting list, and it's tricky to get in and tricky to guess, and he's not really looking for any extra work. I know somebody asked Jamie while I was out doing bits and bobs at National where the work had been done, and we'd got some business cards and stuff like that from him, so we gave him one. They rang up on the Monday, and he rang me up on the Monday and says, "Can't believe you've got me more work." So bear that in mind. I waited 2 years. You could be waiting that, you could be waiting longer, especially if you all go flooding. But I think from my experience, the things that you should really be taking away is getting to know a restorer before you just go in blind and give them your car and your money, and getting to know the quality of work that they've got done. Asking around. I have spoken to people about places that they've got their cars done and heard mixed opinions about some places. But whenever I mentioned minor services to people who knew about Morris Minors, they were all glowing praise, glowing responses about it. It was all hugely positive, which obviously works massively in his favour. It gave me a lot of reassurance putting it in there. So you want to be looking for somewhere that people speak highly of at least 90% of the time. You want to, where possible, see if you can talk to previous people who have had their cars done by them. I was really fortunate that loads of Morris Minor owners in my area, because Minor Services is relatively local to me, loads of people in my area have his stickers in their windows, and so I've been able to talk to them at a show about their car, about the work that he's done on it, and get an idea of it. And I think if someone's willing to display a sticker about where the work on their car has been done, that speaks volumes about the kind of level of work and their satisfaction with that level of work. So yeah, look for an enthusiast. Look for someone who's going to treat your car the way that they would want their car to be treated. And look for someone who's going to give you their time and their knowledge if you want it. If you're happy to just put your car in and come pick it up in a couple of months' time or a year's time, depending on the amount of work, that's fine. But if you want to be able to go and learn and hear all of the stuff about your car, go and get photos. That was another thing, getting the photos and being able to have that file of all of the information that had been done. That was a given from the start. I'd seen photo albums of his previous projects, and I knew that I was going to be given the same amount of information and photos on exactly what had been done for my records, which in the very unlikely situation I was ever going to sell Peggy, that is the sort of stuff that a future buyer would see as gold dust, because you can see exactly where the money has been spent and how it's been spent and where it's been done, and to the quality that it's been done. So that's my kind of advice. Again, like I say, any questions, let me know. And I am also hoping to get Ian to come on the podcast and have a little chat about his years and years working with Morris Minors, his enthusiasm for the cars. And so watch out for that. And if you've got any questions for him about restoring cars or working on cars, then by all means drop me a message with those as well, and I'll work those into when we get to do that interview. I hope you found this really useful, because that's really what it is. It's the podcast is always a log for me of stuff that's been done to Peggy. So me listing all of that work has been about that, but also it's about sharing those experiences and making classic car ownership accessible and more approachable for as many people as possible. I don't pretend that what I've done is something that everybody could do, especially at my age. It's been a huge privilege to be able to do that, but it's a car that both me and my partner are hugely invested in. We've had a lot of happy memories with it. We hope to make a lot more, and so that's obviously influenced our decision and our investment. I hope you've enjoyed. I realise this has gone on for super long, so we'll wrap it up here. And if we need a second part, we'll come back to any further questions. But in the meantime, drive safely and happy motoring.